A lot is going on in the world, including what could be some historical elections. And I'll begin to those in a little bit and talking about some of the history making aspects of these elections and seeing which way they will go and all in that way. By the way, it does look like Biden has met with congressional leaders or will be meeting with congressional leaders on the debt ceiling, and he's going to be cutting his Asia trip short, and he's definitely cutting short that Asia Pacific visit and all in that space. And I know that much to the chagrin of one of our panelists, that being Shaquille, and all along those lines, that we'll see if he can come in at some point. I know he's been busy with some business trips and things of that nature. He will be canceling his visit to Australia and Papua New Guinea as the debt ceiling negotiations continue. So that is something that is going on and all along those lines. So that is something that is happening, and we'll see what happens in that sense as well. By the way, Speaker McCarthy says he thinks the U.S. won't default as the debt talks inch forward. So he's thinking that there will not be a default in that particular case, but we'll see if that is the case or not the case, as it may be. And as y'all know, I am a sports fan, so it was with sad news that I learned yesterday that a schoolmate of mine had actually lost his job there at the Philadelphia 76ers, that being Doc Rivers. And like I said, I did go to Marquette at the same time that he was there. He actually went hardship in my junior year and then had a good playing career, and then, of course, a pretty good coaching career, even though he hasn't done that good in game sevens, and that was probably part of the reason for his losing that particular job. But now we'll see if he goes into another coaching job or whether he goes into the sports commentary. And who knows, maybe I'll reach out to some of our mutual friends and see if I can get him to come here on Pod TV to at least have a conversation. That would be a good thing, since it's been a minute since I've seen Doc, and all along those lines, even though we did go to school together and I did run into him in Raleigh several decades ago during his playing days, and definitely keep in touch with one of his friends and one of my former roommates and all along those lines. So we'll see what happens in my efforts to try to get Doc on, and whether that happens or doesn't happen. And of course, and Lee will be glad to hear about this part, and then we'll get off into some other news, more related issues and all of that. But definitely there is talk about, after the Doc being let go, of a Joel Embiid and Nick trades. So I do know that Lee is over there in New York. Not sure if he's a Knicks fan or not, but I may ask him. And it does look like there is some whispers of that particular trade taking place as they're trying to figure out what to do with Joel Embiid as well as Joel Harden. Not Harden, but definitely the beard as he's known. So we'll see what is going on in that case, and whether any of those players get traded or don't get traded, and what happens with this whole notion of a Nick and Embiid trade, and whether that goes on. I do know that I watched the game yesterday, and it looked like it was going to be a runaway, but the Lakers did give a fight and came back and almost stole the game. But they did wind up losing, I think, by 6 points to Denver, and all in that space. And later on this evening, we'll see what happens in the first game of the Miami Heat and Boston Celtics game. And I believe that here in this area, the Carolina Hurricanes will be getting ready to have their chance at winning an Eastern Finals, and then hopefully getting a chance to go up for the Stanley Cup, and all in that space. So that's some of the things that are going on in the sports world. I do know that the second leg of the horse races is about to take place as well, and then there'll be that third leg. And who knows, haven't had a triple crown in the And I don't know we're going to have a triple crown this time either. And by the way, you might be interested in this. I'm going to bring in Lee and see his thoughts, and then I'm going to bring up some stuff about the elections that took place as well. But Elon Musk is claiming that George Soros hates humanity. So that is one of the things that was reported in CNN, and we'll see if there are some folks that have some thoughts around that and what is going in that space. And of course, there are world issues such as the Myanmar junta accused of blocking aid to the Rohingyas, or the cyclone that hit that area and all along those kind of spaces. And it does look like an Everest record has been set. So Polly has set an Everest record with 27 ascents, and the Britain has made the most summits by a foreigner. So that is something that is going on in the whole conquering nature kind of thing in that space. And it looks like there are some chat GPT scams that are infiltrating Apple's app stores and Google Play. Anytime you get something that is new and all along those lines, there are going to be some major things in that way as well. And I said I was done with sports, but actually there was something that I saw yesterday that would be a shocker to the sports world if it takes place. I actually read about this yesterday. I don't know that it will actually take place and all along those lines, but there is a major rivalry that goes on here in this area and all in that space, that being between UNC and Duke. But there is some talk about the Majestic Seven, I think that's what they're calling themselves, actually leaving the ACC. So the North Carolina Tar Heels are among several schools that could possibly be leaving the ACC. Now, you want to talk about a disruption in the sports world, that would definitely be a disruption. We did see something similar happen in the rebuilt Big East and all in that space. But I did see that article yesterday and was quite interested in what that would be looking like. But I'll bring in Lee, and maybe he's got some thoughts. And then the last thing that I'll get to is what I said I was going to get to the first part, which is this whole things going on with the whole notion of what is happening in these elections that took place yesterday in Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Florida. And like I said, Republicans have their candidates in Kentucky, Democrats have their majority in Pennsylvania, and the 2024 GOP presidential primary has another clash between former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in the books. So it looks like voters gave DeSantis a pair of brushbacks on Tuesday, most notably in Kentucky, where the Florida governor's 11th hour endorsement in the GOP governor primary flopped. But back home in Jacksonville, Democrats knocked off another DeSantis ally, electing the city's first female mayor. So Philadelphia is now likely posed to do the same. So former city council member Sherelle Parker emerged from a deep field of Democratic candidates to claim the party's mayoral nod, defeating a pair of leading liberals in the process. Progressives did better in Western Pennsylvania, but the whole party was able to celebrate a special election results that with Heather Boyd's victory preserved Democrats' narrow control of the state legislature. So here are 7 takeaways according to this article that I'm reading from Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So Cameron's victory sets up one of the 23's most important elections and one with definite implications for 2024. So Bashir's bid for a second term could be an important bellwether for next year when his party is defending Senate seats in other red states, including Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. And Bashir, whose father was a 2-term governor, defeated Republican Governor Matt Bevin, who is an unpopular incumbent who had angered many, even in his own party, back in 2019. As expected, he fended off some kind of surface opposition in Tuesday's primary. Republicans, though, argue that despite Bashir's popularity, November's general election is likely to be competitive in the deep red state. And Cameron on Tuesday said the Republican-controlled legislature deserves most of the credit for Bashir's accomplishments. So Cameron said the governor cannot pretend to have hit a triple when everybody else knows that he was born on third base. Not sure I know that much about Cameron, but that was actually a clever little quote. And all along those lines, that he viewed his line of attack on Bashir in the election to come, blaming the first-term Democrat for crime, low workforce participation rates, fentanyl, and schools that he said on the verge of becoming breeding grounds for liberal and progressive ideals. So he could also make history, just like the lieutenant governor here in this area could make some history as well. So we know that if the lieutenant governor is elected here in North Carolina, he would be the first African American governor in North Carolina, and the same could be said there in Kentucky, because Kentucky, he would be this gentleman Cameron, the first African American governor and the first African American Republican to be elected governor in the United States. So, well, actually, that's not, I don't know, depends on which one gets elected first. So it could be that we have two African American governors in the United States if both of them are elected, because definitely both of them are running under the Republican Party. So one of the quotes that he says is, "To anyone who looks like me, knows that you can achieve anything, know that in this country and in Kentucky, all that matters are your values." So he's definitely running on that value-oriented kind of ticket and all along those lines. And by the way, I had mentioned about the race there in Jacksonville, and apparently that particular person would be the city's first female mayor, and definitely that would be Democratic former journalist Donna Deegan, who defeated the Republican former state representative Daniel Davis in Tuesday's runoff election, and she will become the city's first female mayor after campaigning on a pledge to increase transparency in City Hall. And we've actually had a fellow guest here that was saying that a lot of her campaign there in California, where she was based at, was around transparency. So a lot of the transparency issues are also coming up in elections as well. So that's some of the things that I am seeing about those elections. I'll bring up some of the other things. I do believe that if I remember correctly, there was a pushback against the abortion rule and all in that space. So I'm going to bring up none other than Jacoby, do a little bit with the lighting and all in that situation. But how are you doing, Jacoby? And it looks like we could have two Republican governors. I'm going to also bring up Lee Newton Rhodes as well and all in that space. But it looks like we could have two African American governors if the gentleman in Kentucky wins and if the gentleman in North Carolina wins as well.
So we're not going to talk about what they speak on, but just say that we're going to be happy about them being two black governors.
No, I'm just curious about what your thoughts were and everything along those lines. That they definitely have some issues that they have had going
Just
on all along those lines.
just because they're black doesn't mean that. So there's a saying, Mark,
Yeah.
all kinfolk ain't all skin folk ain't kinfolk.
That is true.
So just because that individual is black, just like the one running, just like Johnson, what's his name, running in North Carolina, he's horrible. His policies and everything that he's preaching are horrible. This goes back to, I guess, Lee, since we had this discussion earlier a couple of times. We can have a debate about policy. That's fine. But it's what you stand for and the actions that you push. That is where, we should not have a debate. The things that you push across and say, for example, yesterday in Congress, they were discussing how, I forget which one of the crazy investigations that they're running, but it came up that, well, one of the Republican it was the DC, where they keep going after DC, which makes no sense. Talking about the DC crime rate, all this, and we need to take all this away from DC because DC is so crime ridden, even though DC doesn't rank in the top 10 for crime across the country. There are a bunch of Republican states that do, but they're not talking to those Republican states because it's all a political tool to say, well, Democrat states are all this crime ridden. But in that meeting, or in that investigation, they were talking about how, I think they were talking to there was one public figure coming out of DC, and they were talking about how, well, the abuse on women is skyrocketing in DC, it's up this high percentage, and we should be cracking down on that. And that was coming from the Republican congresswoman who was supporting Donald Trump, who Donald Trump just got held liable for abuse on women. So you cannot argue with, we can discuss policy and work on ways to improve things. I can agree with that. But if your actions are supporting things that you are saying that you are against, that's completely contradictory, and that's telling me that you're just doing this for politics. So the gentleman running in North Carolina has stated that Black people should thank white people for slavery or for being free from slavery. That in itself is a racist comment. That is something that is being pushed by many white supremacists. It's a talking point that Black people should thank white people for being free from slavery. So if you're telling me that racism doesn't exist, yet you're using a very racist talking point as your political or part of your political platform, that should be null and void. You should be done. We can discuss ways to improve lives of others within the communities and say, okay, well, it's well documented. Different communities are affected in multiple different ways. And yes, the minority communities are hit. And historically, they've always been hit in particular ways, and there are ways to improve that. And I can understand, if I can discuss with you policies on ways to approach that. But when you're talking about racism is non-existent, yet using racist talking points, that tells me that right there, you're using a political football and using for votes. When you're telling me we've got to all be about love, we've got to be accepting of others, but yet calling the LGBTQIA community filth, that is antithetical than what you've already started talking about. So when we talk about these Black governors, the Lieutenant Governor Ronson, is it Robinson or Ronson?
Robertson. Mark
Robertson in North Carolina, when he's saying all this negative stuff and attacking and hating these different communities for political points, also trying to go extremely right, which a lot of the right-wing super MAGA policies are hateful and hurtful and only built in that hate space and not really working to improve lives. I can't do that. So it doesn't matter if the gentleman is Black. Same dude in Kentucky. Smart guy. Very smart guy. But the problem is, again, you can't tell me that you're supporting women, yet supporting a man and taking and being happy about the endorsement of a man who's abusing women. And that is your big selling point. And then the McCarthy and the whole fight over, honestly, the fight amongst around abortion, the fight taking away free lunches from kids, and you're talking about, we're here to protect kids. You've got Republicans wearing lapel pins that have the AR lapel pins, yet. Oh, well, we want thoughts and prayers for kids and parents involved in shootings. You're wearing the lapel pin of the gun that just murdered all these individuals.
Toby, in fairness, guns don't murder people. People do.
Time out. Just to answer that, because that is the biggest talking point that is always used. And people don't understand that, okay, why was a gun built? A gun was built to kill efficiently and effectively. We all know that. That is historically why a gun was built. Because in battle, that's why it was built, to kill efficiently and effectively. Why do we make it easier for individuals to access those easily? It's not self-defense against the government. It isn't. Because the U.S. government is not coming against us. And even if they did, just as we talked to Dan yesterday, an AR-15 is not stopping a drone coming at you, a Hellfire drone. An AR-15 is not attacking a tank. An AR-15 is not attacking a nuke or all this other stuff. All this is built off of fear and craziness.
Hey, Jacoby,
It is based, all guns are right now in this country. It's a religion. It's a fun tool. It's enjoyable for people to go out and shoot. It's a hobby. It's hunting. Yes, there's hunting in there. There are all these things that make it into this giant religion. And the idea that if you take away a gun, then only criminals will get it, because criminals are the ones who kill. And a hammer can be just as effective as a gun. So then let's remove guns and see how many people are killed by hammers.
Hey, Jacoby, along those same lines, just really.
Are you passionate about handguns also?
Handguns are the ones that kill people the most. Domestic
violence. That's where the discussion should be, should it not?
So yes, and I agree. And to discuss even that, we can't even pass background checks. We can't even pass a universal background check to stop individuals who are in domestic violence cases to get guns. We can't stop a domestic violence abuser from getting a gun. Why? Because we can't pass background checks. We have the ability to print guns, which is unregulated. We have the ability to buy guns from gun shows, which is unregulated. We have the ability to, lie on a background check. And people who say that background checks are checked all the time and you can't do all this, actually, because it's not a fully regulated system in place, you can literally lie on there. Yeah, if you get caught, yeah, you get in trouble. But
unless your name is Hunter Biden.
No, but not just Hunter Biden. Hold on a second, because I was actually getting ready.
Hunter Biden,
I know it's not necessarily
that's not relevant to anything.
It's not.
No, well, you brought up lying on background forms for purchasing handguns. It was in the news. He lied on a gun application.
And he could get a gun.
He did get a gun.
That's one of the questions I had. Hold on a second.
That's across the board. So
that's one of the questions I was going to ask, because is part of the problem, and I know that you're into, and some people will use this even in the video game argument, and I know where you stand on that and everything, but it's part of the problem that in some ways because I've heard this argument even in some of the conversations around John Morant and what he did and everything, is the gang culture being overly celebrated, therefore, in some degrees, the gun culture and all along those lines.
Here's the crazy part. We in the U.S. do not own a monopoly on gang culture.
No,
we don't own a monopoly on mental health. We don't own a monopoly on domestic violence. We don't own a monopoly on anything but gun violence.
And therefore,
we have the weakest gun laws in the world. We have the most guns in the world. We have the highest gun violence in the world. So there's a correlation there. It's obvious to us. More guns equals more death. We have the highest per capita of guns in the globe by a long shot. We have the highest gun deaths by a long shot. We have the weakest gun laws. So when we know the answer, but because guns have become a religion in our society, we do not touch guns. We always jump to, well, it's video games. Well, you do realize that there are more violent video games across the globe. Every country has violent video games. The same Call of Duty that I can play here, I can play in other countries. There are games over in Japan that are even more violent. There are games in China that are even more violent, but they don't have a high gun death. There are games in Korea. There are games in Africa. There are games in France. Games are not the problem. There's a direct connection between having the most guns, having the most gun deaths, and having the weakest laws. A direct line. And that's why, Lee, when the quick argument is guns don't kill people, people kill people. Okay, well, why do we make it easy for people to get guns? Guns are the most. We know people kill people. People kill people in every country. That happens, but only in the U.S. do we allow people to get guns easily. I mean, it's a direct line. I don't understand.
Sasha had a point, and Lee, apparently you were mentioning some states that have or countries that have higher gun deaths and
Yeah,
everything.
Mark, do me a favor. I just posted a link. Can you click on that and screen share it, please? We come in 32nd per capita on gun deaths. This is current.
I will do a screen share. We'll bring
Gun
that
deaths.
that country. So it looks like Brazil was higher than the U.S. and it looks like
That was in 2019.
World Population Review. Okay. So let's see. Is that what the
Sasha, you had something you wanted to bring up? So while I'm bringing that up and everything, you bringing up a point.
why is
My point is that the gun is a great equalizer, so-called. So
For women, 100%.
how?
yeah,
Wow.
I don't see the point, because if she's already attacked, she is
Yeah.
in no position to get her gun and somehow to try to kill. Because,
You're assuming she doesn't have it on her body or on her person when someone approaches her in her house or otherwise.
My position about gun is somewhat different. The gun is historically allows men who didn't take time and effort to learn martial arts to be able to defend himself and maybe his wife or girlfriend or so on. He's relying on the fact, why do I need all that? I have a gun. So if something happens, I'll just shoot and kill somebody. But if he would have ability to use martial arts efficiently, there is no need to kill anybody. He can disable his attacker very easily. But Americans, most of them are overweight and horribly undeveloped physically. They rely on guns. This is what makes America different from many other countries. In many other countries, in school, you're learning exercises and a way of defending yourself and fight and martial arts and so on. In America, it doesn't exist. Because why do I need to learn anything when I will buy myself a gun for a couple of $100 and I will just kill whoever will disagree with me? Okay,
Mark.
That's an idea.
Mark, scroll down a little bit, please.
Do the other
There's a
link.
chart underneath that.
Do the health data. The acting data.
That one too as well.
Yeah. United States, rise of firearm homicides per 100,000 population, 4.12. Chile, 1.82.
A little bit more, Mark. Underneath the words, there's a chart underneath that. There you go.
Rates of firearm homicide per 100,000 people. District of Columbia, 17. It goes down through the whole U.S., this whole thing. This goes up to May 31st. Oh, that's last year. I'll find one this year. Also, in terms of women in gun deaths, most women are killed by the gun that they own.
Are you excluding suicides?
Suicide's still gun violence. Why make it easy for a person to commit suicide?
I understand your point, but I think we need to distinguish between suicides and others.
Why are we distinguishing?
Why? Because I understand that, but do we do knife deaths by suicide? Because people who want to commit suicide, they pick a gun obviously because it's convenient. They'll pick something else.
Wait. No. They pick it because it's convenient, or is it the most effective tool to kill? Which one is it, Lee?
You're saying
Because
that
it's
if they had the gun, they
convenient
wouldn't
or
commit
the
suicide?
most effective tool to kill.
In your point?
Which one is it? I'm asking you a question. You said because it's convenient. I say no. Is it because it's convenient or the most effective tool to kill?
I don't see the distinction, because if they didn't have that, they'd choose something else. People jump off buildings.
But Lee,
Now-
along the same lines, where would you put? Because it's on this list, but
We're number 32 on that chart, Mark.
Yeah,
Go down
where
to
would you
32.
put- Where would you put accidental deaths? Because there are quite a few folks that will grab a gun because it is not properly secured in the house, and we do know that there have been many.
And that happens, and that's a valid point.
A number of others that have grabbed a gun and have discharged the gun, oftentimes with a fatality involved in everything. So where would you?
And you also have bystanders who are killed.
Yes.
Those are all valid points.
So now what you're trying to do is say we should separate out gun deaths to a particular gun death and put it in a pigeonhole so you can say that, well, we don't really have that many gun deaths. Is that what we're doing?
No, I'm saying I think it's very relevant to just take out suicides versus other.
Here, are we going to do that with these right here with El Salvador? We're so happy that El Salvador, you know, the country El Salvador has 35.5 per 100,000 when we're sitting at how many?
Number 32, Mark, I think.
Yeah, to find where it is in that.
It goes down past 10. No, keep going to the chart. No, not the page, just the chart though. Go back up.
Yeah, I went to the chart and I didn't see.
And the chart scrolls down past 10. If you click on the chart.
Oh, I got you.
Also, this is from 2000 when?
When is this chart? When
This
is this
chart, it's the let me see if it says on the top.
Wise voter. About wise voter. Who's wise voter?
The United States is 32,
Based
Mark.
on the leadership of. Okay. Yeah.
That's the first thing that came up with me.
Gotcha.
Okay, Jacoby, you got a different chart?
Oh yeah, I posted one up there.
I'll bring up
Okay.
that chart because I'm having a hard time with this particular chart. But we'll see what's going on here. And you posted a different one?
Yep.
Accept that.
And so again, we know that a gun was built to kill. That's it. It's not built to stun, built to kill. A knife was not built to kill, it was built for other purposes. We know these things. We know that a gun, and this is why separating it out, suicide, so on and so forth, why make it easier for somebody to get a gun? We should make it tougher for people to get guns. We should actually put in more laws and hold the laws or hold people to the laws that are currently on the books. But
So you would want to repeal the Second Amendment?
if I could, yes, I would honestly love the Second Amendment to be gone because it's a religion. It's not even being used for its purpose. Not at all. Where's a well-regulated militia?
Okay, would this apply to politicians also?
Where is a well-regulated militia?
I'm not a lawyer. I understand your point. I'm not going to argue that part.
So then if we cannot have a well-regulated militia, therefore, we are not applying the Second Amendment.
You would need an attorney to argue with you. I'm not going to argue that point.
And then on top of that, the only gun that was upheld by the Supreme Court in the Scalia case is a handgun. So ARs, all this other stuff should be off the docket.
Wasn't that what the case was about?
It was only about a handgun. That's the only thing that is protected according to the Supreme Court by the Second Amendment. That is the Scalia case, the DC case.
The Heller case.
Yes, that's the only one that Scalia ruled on. Didn't rule on ARs, didn't rule on all this other stuff. But again, that's the only one that's quote unquote protected by the Second Amendment. So all these extra guns aren't technically protected. If we're going to say that, oh, we should just focus on the Second Amendment, well, the other ones aren't. And then every time, again, that's why I bring up the well-regulated militia, because we never even, when we talk about the Second Amendment, we disregard that portion of it as if it doesn't say well-regulated militia.
What is that referring to? In your opinion, what's that referring to?
A well-regulated militia?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I'll tell you what it means. It means Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. They are well-regulated militia. And if the guns would be outlawed, they wouldn't even exist, because then all their bearing of guns or any other ammunition would be illegal, and they would go to jail straight away.
Boss, are you saying that when the founders passed the Second Amendment, they had the Proud Boys in mind?
They didn't have a handgun in mind, technically. It was a musket.
No, I'm just asking about the term, the well-regulated militia. What did they have in mind when they passed the Second Amendment?
When they passed the Second Amendment, it was probably looking at something that took place when they were fighting against not only the Civil War, a group that was fighting against the government itself. So you had those militias that were way out in the country, or way out in the different areas.
Are these government militias, like police officers?
No, they weren't.
So then what are they? If they're not government employees or federal state troopers, what are we talking about?
Yeah, they were actually individuals. But and even if they were individuals in groups, that's a militia. That's a group of individuals.
How many does that comprise?
It depends on how, two technically considered a group.
Okay, so two guys together could be a militia.
Yeah, but we aren't well regulated. That's what you're missing. Even the
So I'm asking you, what does that mean? Well regulated.
We have to have regulations based on their background. They have to go to classes, so on and so forth.
Did we see that in the 1800s, 1900s?
Again, did we see a handgun in the 1780s?
No, so we had a Second Amendment was passed.
Yes,
it had to apply to somebody.
So you're saying?
No, I'm asking.
I am, and I'm trying to clarify so we can speak from the same base. We can speak from the same base. So when we're talking about a militia, we're also talking about the equipment that they're using as well, correct? So
Correct.
The equipment that we're using, are we talking about handguns, or did the forefathers only see the muskets that they were using at that time?
I think it was blanket, if I'm not mistaken. The Second Amendment was passed. It was any weapon. When it was passed, and citizens could own any weapon. You can own a cannon if you wanted, a machine gun, fully automatic.
They didn't have machine guns at that time.
They had it at a certain point, and when they had them, citizens were owning them up until in the early 1900s.
They didn't have it when they wrote they did not have it when they wrote the Constitution.
They may not have it when they wrote the Constitution, but when machine guns were available, citizens were owning them.
So then we're not talking about every weapon.
I don't think that's true. I don't think they put a limit on what citizens can own. That's my point.
So you're saying that they at that time. So you're saying that a well-regulated militia, that the forefathers, when they wrote that document, that it would have included tanks.
Yes, 100%. Which is why citizens, when machine guns became available, had them, and they only recently stopped everyday citizens from owning machine guns, like in the 1900s.
The assault rifles ban?
No, not the assault rifle. I'm talking about fully automatic machine guns. Private citizens were allowed to own them up until recently, in the mid 1900s, I believe.
Why was it taken away?
Because of the Al Capone era and all that stuff. They said this is ridiculous. So what they did is they didn't amend the Second Amendment, take it away. They just taxed them up the gazoo, so it wasn't practical for private citizens to own it. But they grandfathered a lot of people in who owned them already legally.
We're never going to come to agreement on what they were talking about in terms of because the forefathers, you're saying that they forethought any weapon whatsoever, blah, blah, blah. I disagree.
No, what I'm saying is they didn't foresee that. They said no restrictions whatsoever.
Hey,
Lee and
Jacoby, question for you. And I know y'all going to Lee and Jacoby. Hold on a second. Because one of the things that has gone on in this conversation around a well-regulated militia is what else was going on at the time of the well-regulated militia conversation?
Actually, even a
Hold
better
on a second,
question.
because one of the things that was going on that I don't think is addressed enough in this whole conversation is that, and I know that Shaquille, you get tired of me bringing it up and everything, but part of that well-regulated militia Second Amendment argument was actually around slavery, because part of what they were trying to do was to make sure that the rebellions that were coming from the slaves were able to be squashed very quickly and everything. So that was part of that well-regulated militia. It was a deliberate attempt to stop some of the Brown
Nazis.
and some of the other rebellions that were going on at that particular time. So let's be very clear as to who had the guns at that time and what was being used for those guns and why they had that rule in there and everything.
Yeah, I mean, slavery has been a part of the Constitution since day one. I mean, that's all huge and everything. The big question I have, because we're not going to be able to agree on not only what a well-regulated militia was, and then even the well-regulated part. So let's look at common sense stuff and see if we can land on that.
Jacoby,
what?
I just have one point to make, and this is what bothers me tremendously. And I agree with you that we're not necessarily going to agree. Why does Congress make vague or misleading, and whether it's amendments or bills, what have you, that are not in plain English, so that it cannot be argue back and forth? What does it mean? Why don't they just come and clean it up and say this is what it means?
Because not everybody. That's because not everybody is going to read the same language the same way. We can't even read the Second Amendment the same way. So
I'm saying, so they should come and clean up the Second Amendment. So this is what we meant.
But again, right now they're not going to do that. We can't even clean up. It's because it's a religion now. For example, and this is why I want to get to the more common sense stuff and discuss that more so than even. For example, can we agree that that guns were built to kill?
And therefore?
So, I mean, I just want to start off at basis so we can get some agreement.
They're meant to kill, not necessarily humans, animals also, and it's not self-protection, but to kill.
Agreed.
Yes,
I'm just going with kill. That's what they were built for. There was no other purpose. It was just built to kill and kill most efficiently and effectively.
And from a distance, maybe also, but go on.
Yes. So in looking at it that way, should certain people not be allowed to have guns?
With the Second Amendment?
I'm not asking about Second Amendment. We're never going to agree there.
No, I understand that.
I'm asking you, do you believe that certain individuals should not be allowed to own guns?
The reason I'm uncomfortable answering that is because what other right would we want to take away also? The First Amendment from them? Third Amendment? Fourth Amendment?
Again,
why
I'm not asking all that. You're trying to come up with other excuses to block it. I'm asking you legitimately. You just said people kill people. So obviously you have a view that certain people should not own guns, correct?
So to your question, and I understand where you're going, those people, which is why in a lot of states, felons who have already committed murder, for example.
I haven't even gotten to who I'm talking about.
No, I understand it, but you asked me a question.
Yes. So do
those people who have abused that right maybe should fall in that category?
So you believe that? So we'll start off. So you're saying felons should not own guns? Specifically
felons who have abused that right.
Okay.
Not white-collar criminals, for example.
So we got felons who've abused that right or killed some individuals or done some very bad things to abuse that right should not own guns. So we've got one group of individuals that should not own guns. Should individuals, domestic abusers be allowed to own guns?
I hear your question. I don't have an answer because we're going to take away knives from them also.
I'm just asking about guns.
No, I understand. I don't have an answer for you. It's a good question. It's a good question. But since they haven't been convicted of abusing them yet, I'm not going to go there.
But what I'm saying is, we agree that knives were built for other purposes, correct?
No, I understand that. I'm not just.
No. But Lee, I don't want you to go off on a path and a rabbit hole. I'm trying to stick. We're going to stay in this.
I got you.
Point. So we agree that knives were built for other purposes. So we can't say take away all the knives. We agree that hammers were built.
Well, no one has a right to own a knife.
We agree that hammers were built for other purposes. Baseball bats, all this other stuff, cars, so on and so forth. We're talking specifically.
But no one has a right to own those things. You know that.
We're talking specifically about an item that we agree was built to kill. So, if we're agreeing that an item was built to kill, do we agree that domestic abusers should not own an item that was specifically built to kill?
I'm not going to agree to that. Do you? Is that your opinion?
So you feel it is okay that someone who commits domestic abuse,
which would include slapping your wife, which includes slapping your spouse.
It also includes beating, raping, truthfully abuse. So you're saying that domestic abusers who beat spouses, beat wives, beat children,
which is disgusting.
So yes. So you're saying that you cannot agree that those individuals should not own an item that specifically is built to kill.
I can't make that jump. Can you?
Make that jump. You can make it for felons
who have abused the Second Amendment or who have used firearms already. Yes.
So you're saying that only an individual that has used a firearm incorrectly and become a felon is the only individual that you can take an item that is specifically used to kill away from.
That's my opinion. Is yours different?
Yes, and the reason being, an individual that we already know is abusing, beating, one step away from killing an individual, I am willing to say that person should not have access to an item that makes it easier for that individual to kill a woman, child, or another man. But you're saying that that individual, it is okay for them to own an item that can easily kill a woman, child, or another man. Do you understand? And when this is,
I understand where you're coming from. I just got
no, but this is why the excuse saying guns kill people, guns don't kill people, people kill people. The argument isn't about one, oh well, gun this, gun that. The argument is just what I just told you. I don't believe that it should be easy for somebody who we can find out from a background check is about to kill somebody, should have access to an item to make it easier for them to kill people.
But using your logic,
no, you are saying, and we just established this.
I understand.
You are saying that it should be okay for that individual who we know is about to kill somebody should have access to something that makes it easier for that individual to kill somebody. We can
understand that, but
when they go and kill somebody.
You're correct. Okay, but using your logic, where do you draw the line? Two teenagers who got into a fight for their life now, they can't own a firearm because they were physically assaulting each other?
Wait a minute.
Where do you draw the line then?
There are easy lines to draw. I just specifically
I understand that. If you're going to include domestic violence, which is a despicable crime, if you're going to include that where they have not abused the Second Amendment, where do you draw the line then for people who have committed any crimes?
Now,
so wait a minute.
Easy.
Hold a second. So you're saying that if there's a fight between two teenagers, and that happens all the time in all the schools, that
that's my point, Mark.
The right to have the to go out and get a gun to come back and shoot that individual in the school, which oftentimes does happen and everything. So that makes no sense.
Jatovia was saying, if I understood correctly, that people who have committed domestic violence, which is a despicable crime, should have their Second Amendment rights revoked. Now, based on that, I'm asking him, and I'll ask you, Mark, where do you draw the line then? Only domestic violence or any violence?
If you commit a crime, your Second Amendment and ability to go and get a gun should be taken away.
Any physical violence?
Yes.
How about white collar crime?
Yes.
How about a
If
misdemeanor?
you commit a crime, because you say, and this is the funny part. This is the part that always gets me. Now, the argument is, so yeah, for me, any crime, done. You can't get a gun. So
just physical crimes or white collar crimes also?
Again, ANYCRIME. Any crime. So that takes away the argument that everybody with the Second Amendment religion says, well, if I can't get a gun, then only criminals can get guns. You were saying that it should be okay for a criminal to get a gun.
No, I didn't say that.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
No, I didn't.
Hold on a second. Question, because we're winding down and everything.
Let me point out how he just said that. I just specifically said domestic violence abuser. You said, well, what if you can get domestic violence if you slap someone? So if that person is a domestic violence abuser who is now committed a crime, you're saying that they should be able to get one. So you're legitimately saying a criminal should be able to get a gun.
Unless it's a criminal who has abused the Second Amendment.
Criminal. Just as yesterday when you said, well, if they cross the line, that immigrant is illegal. It doesn't make everybody illegal then, those immigrants?
You think people who cheat on their taxes shouldn't have guns?
So again, you are there specifically trying to make a difference for guns that you wouldn't even give to a human being.
What do you mean? Human being?
You said that every immigrant that crosses the line is illegal. Doesn't that mean they're breaking the law? Doesn't that therefore make them illegal? So you're saying every immigrant is illegal, right?
No, that was your point, not mine.
No, that's what
you said anyone who breaks the law should have it taken away. I didn't say that. You did.
No, you said yesterday about immigrants that every immigrant that crosses the line without going through the process should be that they're illegal. Therefore,
their entry into the United States is an illegal entry. That is correct.
So you're not doing that for criminals.
Doing what?
When I said a domestic abuser, you tried to separate it out and saying, well, you can get considered a domestic abuser for just slapping somebody.
Okay.
Hold on a second, because we only got about 7 minutes. I do want to bring in another question, and I was actually going to bring it to Sasha, but I'd love to hear everybody's points. And what point does self-defense play a role in the conversation? Because personally, I think that that's what's going on in Ukraine, because they had somebody that was illegally going into their country and invading them. So a lot of people in Ukraine, apparently they have a lot more guns than I was aware they had of, because apparently everybody in Ukraine has a gun, because that seems to be what was going on in their pushback and everything. So when the issue of self-defense comes in, should people be allowed to have a gun, whether that's here, Ukraine, or a number of other places that are fighting these wars of self-defense, and oftentimes they're using guns in that self-defense argument, including here in the United States.
Sasha, Ukraine would be very different if people didn't have their own guns, would it not?
I'm not aware that everyone in Ukraine owns a gun. I'm not aware of it. I never heard about it, and I would not support such verification would be required for sure. I never heard about that. Now, Ukrainian nation is battling heroically tremendous Russian forces. And apparently, I've read lately a very interesting article about that the war, among other things, is also about self-identity, because Russia is bothered, especially Putin, that when Kievan Rus was in existence of about 1,000 years ago, and Kiev was called mother of all Russian cities, Moscow at that time hasn't even existed. So therefore, the whole, say, notion of East Slavic identity is based on Kiev's story, not Moscow. So now, what Ukrainians developed a theory that they're mimicking Russian insertion, that Moscow is the third Rome. So the first Rome was Rome, which was destroyed by Vandals and others. The second Rome was Byzantia, who became actually continuation of Rome. And after Constantinople was taken by Turks and destroyed, then Moscow became the third Rome. Apparently, what Ukrainians develop a theory, whereas Russia is not a third Rome. It's a second Sarai. Sarai was a capital of Tatar Mongol um, forces that invaded Russia and destroyed completely. So what they're saying is that Moscow, Russia, is a second Sarai, and Ukraine, Kiev, apparently is the third Rome. So the Ukraine is a part of European civilization, which original Kiev always was, and until Russia grabbed it and inserted into the Soviet Union. Um, that's really where and this is an irreconcilable historic problem, because if you agree with Ukrainian notion, then Moscow indeed is a part of Asia. It's not even European country in a normal sense. Also, if you look at the map of Russia, it lies mostly in Asia, and their autocratic style is becoming from Asia. It's not European style of governance. And Kiev, where in the last 20, 30 years, they had several elections, several changes of presidents. So they have transparency, they have a democracy, maybe not perfect democracy at this point, especially when there is war, but they are on the road to democracy. And Russia has to be taken out of the progress where in this part of the world lies primarily with Kiev, with Ukraine.
Hey, Sasha, along those same lines, and we brought it up on a couple of other shows, and I mentioned earlier about Elon Musk's quote about George Soros and him actually comparing him to a X-Men villain and all of that, and definitely he seems to be using some of that nationalism argument that has been gone on for a number of years, even before the Ukrainian war. So, is this something that we're seeing in throughout the country? And I'd love to hear Jatovi's thoughts about this, because it does seem like there is very much of a nationalistic kind of conversation that's going on, not just in the United States, but around the world and everything, where people are having their nation first kind of attitude, and definitely will oftentimes phrase their enemies as being against humanity, because that's basically what Elon Musk said about Soros and everything. But I'm just wondering, is this something that we're going to see more of, in y'all's opinion?
More of exactly what?
This kind of nationalistic kind of view around the world, because a lot of people are like, Ukraine for Ukrainians, Poland for Poland, I believe is the phrase that other people, including Sasha, have used, and a lot of this kind of like very nationalistic belief system.
I think we're in the death rattles of it. Same thing, we're in the death rattles of the whole white supremacist movements and stuff like that. As the older generations begin to fade out, the younger generations are more globalist. The younger generations are a lot more empathetic to others. They're open to others. So there's it will be there for a while, just like racism is never going away. It's just starting, hopefully, as the younger generations grow, push those extremes to the end. And that's what's going on. Because
is that only in Western countries, Toby, or across the globe? Like China, I don't think is going to stop it. I don't think I can ever be Chinese. My kids can never be Chinese.
It's not that. It's the honestly, the internet was a great push for this. And as you know, people grow up and experience other countries and experience other things. A lot of times that is done via TV, but as these older groups that are within governments, as they begin to phase out and other new younger individuals come in and begin to add in some, hey, this isn't the way that it is, or this is a different view that I've seen by traveling here. That helps, and that'll hopefully begin to push those things away. Because
should not each individual country have sovereignty?
Huh?
Should not each individual country have sovereignty? Should we give up our constitution because there's some global government?
No, sovereignty doesn't have to do with people viewing others as being welcoming to other viewpoints. That's not dealing with sovereignty.
No. I thought we were talking about expanding countries into like one world government. Mm-mm. What are we talking about then?
Nationalism is more like pride in your own.
Yeah, nationalism. Yeah, nationalism is something different. Nationalism is hatred of others, and nationalism is basically is akin to white supremacy.
What do we do in the Olympics? We cheer our country, do we not? High school, we cheer our.
That is different. What you're trying to create a connection that is not there. You're trying to say that just because I cheer for the U.S. basketball team, I hate all the other ones. That's what nationalism is a hatred of others because you're not me.
If it's based on hatred, I agree with it 100%. Nothing to discuss. But if it's based on loving your country, you want to come here, be an American.
There's a difference in nationalism and loving your country. That's what you're not hearing me on. Loving your country and being proud of your country and being a part of a country and enjoying that, that's not nationalism. Nationalism.
What would you call that?
Nationalism is when it becomes, well, I hate this country because they're not the U.S. I hate this country because our country should step on that country because it's not. That's when nationalism comes into play. When others come from a different country, well, your culture sucks because the American culture is so great. That's nationalism. We should string up all those individuals from such and such a country because they're.
So you're saying nationalism is based on hate versus just being very patriotic?
Yes, nationalism is based on hate. It's not about loving country. It's about hating others.
Yeah, nationalism is definitely based on hate in a lot of ways and all in that system. I know we're winding down. The other thing I was.
No, but I think we can all agree that anything based on hate is not positive.
No, definitely not positive.
That's why I'm saying that as the younger individuals grow, and the younger generations, as much as they get bagged on, yelled at, and Gen Z, blah blah blah. No, the younger generation is open to a lot more ideas than what we have because they're
also open more to different cultures as well. Because you mentioned that Lee, that your children could never become Chinese and everything, but I do find that there are younger members of the younger population that are more quick to try to learn Mandarin or Cantonese, and they are definitely looking at some of the cultural things. I mean, K-pop is very popular among some of our.
No, I understand that, but if they move there, they'll never be accepted as a Chinese citizen.
But that's not it, Lee. The thing isn't about I could never be Chinese. The thing is, how can I learn from their culture to improve my life and accept things that they're doing and share what I have? How can
we've been doing since
how can I celebrate?
Day one.
How can I celebrate their country and their culture and show an openness to that? That's what we should be doing more so of. It's not, and that's not being globalist. That's just being accepting.
That's just being human experience, learning from each other.
But the problem is when we get to the ideas and the ideals that we're so much better and they suck and whatever they have isn't worth anything that we have. That's that nationalism. That's that hatred. And when don't even think about, and this is nothing against you because others do it. So I'm not trying to speak to you personally. I'm trying to speak to we as in general. When we get the idea that I will never be, but it doesn't matter that I will never be. It's about empathy. How you said it's about being human. That's that empathetic view. So the I will never be should not be in our mind. The idea should be, well, how do I learn from? How can I accept their culture? And that goes the same thing. What's going on in our country itself, to bring it back, I guess, to here. And this goes to another political problem that I have with the GOP and so on and so forth. When we were talking about the LGBTQIA community and, oh, well, why do they keep flashing this in front of our eyes? Well, we never said anything when Bugs Bunny kissed other female bunnies, or said anything when Mickey Mouse dated Minnie Mouse. But when we see two gay characters on screen, why do they have to flaunt it? We're not really what are they flaunting? Two people being in love is two people being in love. Why can't they be accepted and that be normalized? And that be, it's not a matter of, well, I don't want to see no gay. Well, okay, don't go to a gay club. Don't try and date gay people. Well, gay people shouldn't be, a gay marriage shouldn't be a thing. Well, don't get married to another person of the same sex. If you don't really care, you don't have to do it. But don't get mad that somebody else does it. It should be accepted and normalized. It should be okay for two individuals or those in the gay community to get married. Marriage, it's just two people falling in love. Let it happen.
Yeah. Hey, Jeffrey, just really quickly, and then I'll get us out of here. But I did mention it at the beginning and everything, and it was something that was non-news and non-entertainment related. But is there any possibility that this is actually going to happen since you are a sports person? Because I was actually shocked when I saw that UNC and the Magnificent Seven, which I think includes Virginia, might actually be breaking from the ACC. So I was like, wait a minute, is this actually going to happen? And is that a danger with that whole rivalry with UNC and Duke? So, and then we'll end on that note. But is this actually going to happen?
I doubt it would happen, but money rules everything. And football is king in terms of money in college. And that's why all the conferences are all trying to hunt and find the cash cow that's going to bring to their conference all this money. That's why the SEC teams won't leave the SEC. Teams want to go to the SEC. That's where the football money is. That's where the football schools are. The Big Ten picked up people. Yeah, the ACC picked up some, but I doubt it will happen. But again, you never know because money rules everything. Everything is for sale. That's capitalism.
Yeah. Speaking of money ruling everything, I said I was going to throw this to you, Lee, and I definitely would throw it. Are you ready for Joel Embiid to come to the Knicks? I did say that I was going to mention some sports, and there is that talk.
Mark, here's a shocker for you, Mark. I'm not a big sports fan. Any sports.
Any sports, all right.
I just spent 1 year at OSU, Ohio State, which is a very big football school.
Yep. You definitely did that. So on that note, we're going to get on out of here. And I know that I think the Hurricanes start today, or is that tomorrow that they start their East Conference quest? Huh?
It's Thursday. Thursday, it'd be Canes in Florida.
Canes in Florida, and we'll see who makes it to the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
On that note, we're going to get on out of here.
Y'all have a good day. Take care, Tasha.
Coming our way at 1 o'clock.
Jacoby, it's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Lee.
Yeah. Great conversation. And we'll be back on tomorrow with more conversations. And like I said, I'll be seeing Sasha and Milan as they'll be talking modern investment at 1 o'clock.